Hey, it's Jordan. I am here in another episode of United Sacrifice Zones. This is the East Palestine edition. I try to keep it light because it's so horrifying what's going on everywhere. But I'm in East Palestine, about 2 blocks away from the chemical detonation that went on 20 months ago, where Norfolk Southern, the multi-billion-dollar corporation, unnecessarily nuked this town. We're very close to the border of Pennsylvania. We've been here many times, and I'm here with several residents from East Palestine, Western Pennsylvania. And I should tell you, hope my wife's not watching, but I feel a little loopy because I went into the house, which you are no longer living in, and pretty much within, I don't know, 20 seconds for me, I felt a headache. And it's different in different rooms. The smell is different, but there's chemicals in this house, and the EPA and the state of Ohio, everything's fine, despite, people's own noses, ears, and symptoms. Everything is not fine 20 months later, but it is a chemical petri dish. I feel it, and obviously you guys have been feeling it for far too long. So I'm here with several of you, Christina, Krista, Ashley, Candy, I'm going to get it, don't tell me, Carly, Matt, Chris. Wow, I'm shocked I got that. All right, so let's start with an update. We're now 20 months after this. A judge recently allowed a settlement to go through, so we could get to that later. But basically, this has been blessed as safe by federal, state, yet symptoms seem to be getting consistently worse, including in kids, which we just talked about. Since this is your house, we'll start with you. Give the audience an update. What's going on here?
So far, I've brought in different groups of people into my house. I know Chris was in one of the groups. We had another group Krista was in. Candy was in some of them. No one can really last in my house without having serious issues like, oh, this isn't right, after about 5 minutes, 3 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. But it's definitely a noticeable difference. It's not something you can live in. It's not something anyone can work in due to the regulations they have for these chemicals. So why should I have to live in it? And there's no resolution for me. Yes, there was a court hearing. I opted out. But still, we have to make it work with the mistakes that they did, and no one's willing to test in my home. I have to do it myself. My house has formaldehyde above the allowed limits to live in, vinyl chloride inside and outside, and we're still waiting on anything to happen. People are still getting sick. We have kids that are going through puberty issues with hormones. They're getting acne at age 6.
And the puberty issues are coming years before puberty would normally start?
Yeah. I'm not a doctor. Keep that straight. I'm not a doctor. I've talked to people. I do know from having a family member that did go through early puberty. Now, it is very uncommon for a whole town and surrounding areas to have kids around the age 6, 7, and 8 to have hormones to produce puberty, to grow hair, to go through their cycles earlier, for young boys to grow excessive leg hair to the point where they look like a 15, 16-year-old, having acne on their face. We're hearing this more and more and more. We're hearing kidney disease, enlarged hearts. We're hearing so many different things that are going on. And because of that, I've been doing surveys like you know, and I'm going to be releasing one digitally for everyone in this area to be able to give those symptoms so we can see what's really going on, since the government's not doing that for us. The EPA is not doing that for us. No one is doing it for us. We're all working together. And just like how we made this group happen real quick, we're going to make this happen quicker than 10 years.
And to be clear, you've been forced to live in a camper because you can't live in your house, even though they're telling you it's fine. Yeah. Yet the EPA didn't test your house. The only ones that tested your house was Norfolk Southern's contractor, who they did not.
I didn't agree with the documents they had because they allowed basically any entity at any time to be on my property, and I was not comfortable with that. They would not rework the agreement. I even talked to Alan Shaw. No one got back to me. There was no testing done by them, but I had my own testing and continue to do testing, and it just keeps coming back worse and worse.
Chris, you live down the block, and you have to run multiple air purifiers 24/7?
All the time. It still isn't, I wouldn't say it's safe, but I mean, we've been living in there since, I can't remember exactly when we got back in there, July or August of last year. But yeah, we have air purifiers running constantly in that house. We have to. You have to, just to feel a little bit of safety in there.
So, when without the air purifiers, can you smell chemicals, things like that?
I would assume you probably still could. We did strip the house. We pulled up all the carpeting. We got, anything that chemical could have permeated, bedding, drapes, curtains, everything. We had to get rid of all that stuff. But since I've had the purifiers, they have not been off yet. So I don't know, to be honest with you. I'm sure if I turned them off, there would probably be a smell.
With the air purifiers on, how are you and your family's symptoms?
Well, I suffered through severe heart failure. My wife has high blood pressure. My one stepdaughter gets nosebleeds. And my 8-year-old, she's 9 now, but my 8-year-old daughter is one of the ones that Ashley was just talking about with going through puberty at 8 years old.
Let's backtrack. Heart failure and these other things, were you and your wife and your kids having these issues before the derailment detonation?
Absolutely not. We were perfectly fine. Since this has happened, I've been unable to work. Like I said, my wife, she had like stroke level high blood pressure. My heart, it grew to double the size. My ejection fraction went down to 16%, which is not good at all.
What does that mean for dummies like me?
Your ejection fraction is whenever your heart expands, it pulls blood in. When it contracts, it pushes the blood out. What it pushes out is your ejection fraction. Most people are between 55 to 70%. I was at 16. And yeah, I was.
And I hate to get too personal, but you mentioned your 8-year-old daughter is now developing puberty in terms of her a cycle, or?
She's had multiple. We actually just went to a doctor about a month ago or so. She actually had got an injection she has to get every 3 months for a while just to pause it, because once girls go through puberty, they stop growing. She's 4'9", so that would be as tall as she would be. So we actually got it paused for right now, but she was going through menstruation cycles.
And how long were you and your family here? We're 2 blocks away from the detonation before you were able to temporarily relocate.
We were here for approximately a month, and that's when I started to get really, really sick, and my health really declined, and we knew it wasn't safe to stay here at all. So that's whenever we got out. And then while we were gone, my wife would come back to the house and start stripping it and getting rid of everything we possibly could, because we ran out of money. We had to come back. So
that's a good amount of exposure for a month for all of you. And I assume you and your wife are pretty troubled by what's going on with your kids.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, what happened to me happened to me. I can deal with that there, but when you start messing around with the kids and everything, that's just it's irresponsible. This is all in Norfolk. None of us asked for this.
What did the doctors say? Because it seems from Flint to here, doctors are all like ghosts and can't speak or connect 2 + 2 = 4. Did the doctor have an answer for why your 8-year-old would be having an early cycle, or why you, what are you, in your 30s, 40s?
I'm almost 50.
Oh, you look good. 49, suddenly heart failure, your wife strokes. Did the doctors connect the derailment?
My primary care physician, on my records, it does say, that because of the train derailment, I developed these symptoms. My cardiologist up in Pittsburgh is actually quoted in the New York Times as saying that he would be very hard-pressed to say that it's not from the train derailment. The bad thing is it's hard for them to prove, and that's where the issue is. It's hard to prove. We know it's what it's from. We all know it. It's just hard to prove it.
And America's laws protect the corporations and don't, have laws for common sense, because typically 8-year-olds aren't having early cycles like that.
See, and that's important for people to talk about, and anyone watching, because I know, Jordan, you've been covering different places. If your kids go through these things, like I didn't know it does stunt your growth, and I've had so many different things I've looked over. People in town have their kids going through this, or they've mentioned they think that their kids are going through it. That's very important, because he had to stop that. She could have stopped growing. Other kids could have that. Now I'm thinking, should my son have something to block that? Is he going to be stunted with growth for the rest of his life? Like, that is something that should not be ignored, and no one should feel embarrassed. No one should feel embarrassed to talk about this.
And to be clear, did Norfolk or the EPA ever test your house for chemicals?
Not one time. The EPA, I've had two small interactions with them. One day we had a dumpster outside and we were throwing stuff away, and they were out checking the air, and they stopped right by my house, and I went outside and I said, what's going on? He goes, I'm getting really high reading here, and left. Didn't tell me what it was. Didn't tell me if I was safe. Didn't tell me if I should leave. Nothing. He just left. No answers. And then after I had the article in the New York Times, the very next day I got a phone call, which I didn't recognize the number. I didn't answer. It was the EPA. And the day after that, they were at my door knocking because they saw that article in the New York Times.
Well, imagine if the New York Times was out here on a more day-to-day basis, what could happen? I'm going to get to everyone else, but I want to zoom out because we're 2 blocks away from the derailment. So now let's move 7 miles away. And you're about 7 miles?
About 6.
6. So I think in the media, this has been called the East Palestine disaster, and it is. But I don't even think we know how far this goes, to tell you the truth. I really think this is kind of the, I don't know what you would call it, but this is more the heartland disaster, because that plume with weather changes went in all different types of, I was getting emails from people as far as Maine about health problems and things coming from the sky. But Carly, we talked before. We have the same birthday, so you're 35, 6, and you suddenly lost your hair very soon after this detonation, and you're noticing a couple other women, different age brackets, losing their hair suddenly. Tell me about what's been going on since we last spoke.
Since we last spoke, what's been going on? Not a whole lot, really. There hasn't been any new coverage besides, the settlement and us still not getting answers, the testing results and things like that, that we deserve to have as residents, I feel. But nothing new for me. I do feel like when I came into town just today, the symptoms here are different than what I experience at my house. Like, I do feel like, shaky, and when I came into town, like I was going to pee my pants, kind of. Like I was going to lose my bladder function. I don't know.
Is that from anxiety or a physical thing?
No, I think that might just be from just being here with all this stuff in the air. And it's raining, and it's always worse when it rains. It brings this stuff back up, so.
And let me ask you, because you were at the courthouse for that settlement. Boy, was that not friendly to the residents. They didn't let residents in the actual courtroom. You had to be in a separate room. The judge even threatened to, a resident who got a little too noisy, I guess, for her. What did she say? Plant her on the ground or something? So put her on the pavement. So there's a settlement, yet they didn't allow any experts outside of the EPA, outside of Norfolk to speak. They didn't allow a toxicologist who says this might be the worst chemical disaster, not in American history, in world history. They didn't allow independent testing. And strangely, the plaintiffs that are supposed to represent all of you still won't release the data from their own chemical engineer that they hired. So, but he has gone public, not releasing the data because he can't. He's gagged, but basically saying that this is not simply fine and there needs to be more testing. It sure seems like that was a rubber-stamped, rammed-through settlement, and all of you, I know it's, a contentious issue between residents here, but there's a whole lot of people who felt that was rammed through too quickly.
Yeah, even if the plaintiff's attorneys didn't want to release that data, the judge could have decided, yes, they deserve to have those answers, and she just said, nope, they deserve nothing. They get nothing. No answers, no nothing. We're just going to shut them down every avenue. We're not going to let them in this courthouse and let them have a voice. We're going to make them sit in a room that, even though it was advertised as a public hearing, when I asked about it being a public hearing after I had made arrangements for my children that day and been there an hour early and went through rigorous security to get in there in the first place, 3 U.S. Marshals enter the room and sit behind me as an imitation tactic to get me to stop asking questions about whether or not it was truly a public hearing, because it was not. And I just feel like our voice is not being taken, or where our voices are not being heard by anybody that has the ability to do anything. And that's frustrating.
And you live over there too. You've you seem to be going to creeks more than the EPA does. You've showed us and Lewis chemicals coming out like a sheen. Talk about how have your symptoms been? I know your kid had symptoms, and other folks in your area, Pennsylvania, that you speak with.
Actually, to give an idea too, I live more south than Carly. I live actually the opposite direction from East Palestine, so that to give an idea of like how far of an area, to cover. But symptom-wise, lately, for me, it's been worse when I come up into town. And it is worse also whenever it rains for me, or when it's foggy.
It's raining today, by the way.
Yeah. I have tremors that I've had since October now, and have gone to the doctor, and he just went from it being a fine tremor to intention tremors. And I thought, well, what does that mean? Like that I'm making myself have? And that's not what the case is. It was, when I looked it up, it could be from alcohol, and I don't drink. It could be...
You don't need to drink here. You'll get drunk just off the chemicals.
Right. And it could be from toxins. The doctor hasn't said that's what it's from, but he's going and sending me to a neurologist to see what's going on.
And it's the same thing. The doctors kind of say we can't definitively say it's from the derailment / detonation.
And he also asked me if I ever had, this is my doctor I've had for like 20 years probably. He asked me if I had them before the train derailment. And I was like, no, which he should know that. But in March last year, he did write on my record that I had exposure to toxins. So at least it's recorded. So I assume that it's from being in the creeks, because other people who've been in the creeks are having the same issues.
Candy, how about you? I know you live around here. Right down the road. Tell us about you, your family.
It's more my husband. I mean, he works still right here in town, but he has the high blood pressure, enlarged heart. He just had bronchitis, pneumonia or something. So he's on quite a bit of medicine, so I don't know.
How was he before the derailment?
Fine. And we were gone for a while out of our house, but we run air purifiers upstairs, downstairs, and in the basement. We're here.
Right there's from my doctor right there, where he actually said vinyl chloride exposure certainly seems to have some symptoms that correspond to the recent train derailment and vinyl chloride spill. In particular, the headaches, dyspnea, and possibly the nausea seem to be related to this exposure. So, I mean, that's right there in the report from the doctor.
The obvious question, Krista, you live in town too, is Norfolk Southern coming house to house handing you free healthcare cards?
I wasn't even allowed to relocate temporarily.
Say that again?
I wasn't even allowed to temporarily relocate at 1.2 miles. I was allowed to evacuate during the event. Well, I guess forced to. But I wasn't allowed to temporarily relocate. I have had very little interaction with them. There's no point, when they tell you no, and then you ask more clearly, a more specified question, and they tell you no, and then you clarify it some more, and they tell you no. You've got your answer.
So you mean the new park that they're building hasn't solved your health issues or your kids' health problems or anything?
Doesn't.
The barbecues and the Easter egg hunt they paid for, that didn't solve your problem?
No, and I didn't participate in them, nor do I plan on being in this area to use their new park. We will find a way. We've had a death in the family recently for somebody who was, as far as we know, not sick, developed sudden heart failure, and passed after a month-long battle. That was my father. He believed everything was fine here. So
I mean, obviously he was older, but was his health semi-okay before all this?
yeah, he was. I mean, yeah, he was the healthiest Vietnam vet I ever knew, is what I always say. He had sugar. He kept it very well controlled, and he had joint problems. You know, bad joints from a lifetime of hard work and such. We were not aware of anything like that. And when Mom took him to the doctor, they both thought it was indigestion. Had they tried to stay home and just treat it like indigestion and a bug, he wouldn't have made it that month.
Right. And you've had a lot, not to blow up your spot, you've had pretty thorough communications with the EPA. So Mark Durno, who's in my view the EPA's cleanup guy, he just goes around from poison city to city and just regurgitates the EPA's bullshit line. But anyway, he told you a couple months ago that they did detect vinyl chloride, but they just forgot to tell the public about it. Tell us, have you been able to stay in touch with EPA officials here, and what is their answer to any of this?
I just talked to Mark last week. Yeah, last week. And we had gone over to the park. He wanted me to meet him over there. And we were talking a bit about, like, why won't anybody stand up for us from the government or anything? He actually told me when their consent decree goes through to read his statement.
Can you explain to the audience what that means, the consent decree? And
Yeah, the consent decree is it involves their settlement against Norfolk Southern, along with
EPA's.
Yeah, and the DOJ. So
The one that we still don't know if the $600 million Norfolk Southern gave was actually their insurance policy. We're still trying to figure that out.
theirs is for like $360 or $380 million, I think. It involves water monitoring and health monitoring for one's 10 years, one's 20 years.
So when he told you once that goes through, read my statement, does that imply that he knows something's not right here?
Well, I read through it last night briefly. Like, it was so late that I just skimmed through it. But he did mention that they don't have enough information to say that there's, medical problems later for us. But that's why they want to do this monitoring.
So in English, his statement says the EPA doesn't have enough data to know if it is safe to live here?
Yeah.
Yet the settlement that they agreed on with Norfolk Southern, the lawyers claim it's fine here. And they put forward, I wish I was making this up, the lawyers that represent them, supposed to represent them, put forward a expert who just happened to have had a lifetime working for Dow Chemical, Exxon, a couple other chemical companies, to say, I don't even know if he's ever been here, to say there's just a 1% chance that there will be medical problems here. So basically the EPA official you've been talking to in his statement basically said they don't know what the future holds.
Yeah, it said that they don't know, and that's why they called researchers in. And they are basing that off of what the NIH thinks that, we don't have the answers to why people are sick, so we need to look into it.
I was told in one of my first interactions with Stephen Lester, he said, I'm not sure this is exactly the quote, but this is approximately, Public Health 101 at Harvard was, in the absence of knowledge, always act to protect human health. So the EPA is acknowledging, and I've told Mark that, you're acknowledging over and over that there's a lack of data, a lack of knowledge. You can't explain why this is happening, yet you're not acting to protect human health.
Can we just cut the bullshit for a second? Not you. They can't explain why this 8-year-olds are having cycles, okay?
But they're not paying attention to it, because if they don't see it, you don't hear it, you don't speak it, it doesn't exist. And that's what they're doing. Because me and her went through our medical records from when we had our kids, and Obama passed something to put it into act if there was ever a disaster like this, that they have all right to look into our medical to take those numbers and do something about it. all it has to do is to be activated.
But let's also rewind. Let's also rewind for a second, because I don't want to get too technical, but this is important. Mr. Durno, he was the one, I think it was, I don't know, April or May 2023, who acknowledged the equipment that they're using to test can't even detect certain levels of contamination, i.e., the chemical testing equipment they were using was really meant to test industrial chemical disasters, like in a plant. So he said, yeah, we're going to miss certain low levels of contamination that could still cause health problems. So the EPA's own testing is not up to snuff. Then you have the fact that the contractor that Norfolk Southern is using, I mean, read the New York Times, CTEH, I believe they've also used Tetra Tech, is known to cherry pick and manipulate data. So you can't find what you're not looking for. I think that's what Scott says. You can't find what you're not looking for. They had to be pushed to even test for dioxins. And what do you know? Their testing was buried on their website, but independent testers who have come in here have found alarming levels of dioxin. And most importantly, as we've already gone through, the star, one of the most renowned chemical engineers in the country, his name's Stephen Petty, that the plaintiff's attorneys hired to do testing, they're hiding his data. They won't release his data. And a judge, for some reason, won't release his data. Well, if his data says everything's fine, wouldn't they rush to release that to confirm there's not? I mean, this is Flint-level cover-up.
So at the end of February, whenever all they were going around testing homes and everything, I work at a local restaurant, and I was of 2023, right after the disaster, when the CTEH people were going around testing people's homes, and the guy came in, and I was talking with somebody else that works there about how bad this was and what they're not testing for, and he interrupts my conversation, and he says, "I can come test your home, and I can assure you it's safe. Where do you live?" And I said, "Right up the road here." And he goes, "I can come test." I said, "Can you test it for TCDD?" And he goes, No, I can't test for that."
Tell the audience what that is.
It is dioxin. It's the most potent and powerful chemical and carcinogenic chemical known to man. I mean, it's bad stuff, and it's created when you burn vinyl chloride with all this crap.
I just want to tell a little story. It'll take 2 minutes, but it's connected to this. So when I was covering Flint, the former governor of Michigan sent his right-hand man around Flint to basically try to pay off sick residents. And one of those residents that they tried to pay off, they said, "Hey, let's give you a tour of the environmental lab in Lansing, the capital." So the residents went. And the residents asked, "What is that awesome-looking machine? It was this big-ass machine with all these buttons and this and that." And the lab supervisor told them, "Oh, this machine allows us to test water for everything on the periodic table of elements." So the residents were relieved. "Oh, great, you're testing for..." "Oh, no, we're only testing for lead and copper. But we have this machine over there that could do it. But by law, they're only required to test." And the same kind of stuff is going on here. They're not testing for certain things. I mean, George Thompson, who is a toxicologist many of us have spoke with, 55 years. I mean, this guy knows his stuff backwards and forwards. His analysis has found that there were as many as 120 chemicals linked to cancer that were created through this detonation and combustion. My guess is Mark Durno and the EPA are not testing for most of those things. Yeah, it's just bizarre. I would say, based on what Stephen Lester said, if they aren't sure of the long-term health effects, wouldn't it then be wise to permanently relocate whomever wants to relocate?
I've talked to Mark about that, and last week we talked about it, and he basically had said, "Well, unless we have like an actual arrow this is the only reason why, there's not really anything they can do." And I said, "Well,
what does that mean, arrows, that this is the reason why?"
You can't directly point at the train derailment for why somebody has nosebleeds, or a bunch of other symptoms.
Like alopecia.
Right.
So you can't directly point to the chemical inferno they created to point to prove that an 8-year-old is having early menstrual cycles, or 30-somethings are losing their hair, or 60-somethings are having double breast cancer, which is very rare in men. His name's Wayne. Strokes, pooping blood, Matt over here. So basically they're saying we don't have a legal straight arrow, so we can't relocate you.
To me, I think, would it be better to relocate people since you don't have enough information? You relocate people and err on the side of caution because it's human lives.
Right.
That's what I've been saying all along.
And Matt, not to blow up your smoke, you and Ashley are together and you've been able to temporarily relocate to a camper outside of town. So your symptoms are better there, but when you come back to town, how are your symptoms?
You know, it's the same thing. Tingling lips, tingling gums. It's bad, but the longer I stay here, the worse my symptoms get. And it's, you know, I don't have continued exposure all the time, so it is, you know, limited exposure pretty much, but whenever I do start to get symptoms, it's stuff I've never experienced before.
And we've talked before, but you've had
puking blood and passing blood that I had for consistent days at a time.
But you did not have before this.
Never.
Tell them about our most recent issues
Never.
I was having.
You can tell them the issues you were having.
Well, after I was in town for about 6 hours, I shit my pants twice, could not even make it. You get a sharp pain in your stomach, and you start to walk. You have no control over your bowels. I did it twice. Never happened in my life. Almost like I was older and I needed to wear a diaper. Like, it was that bad.
I was going to say, you're not an old lady in Depends. You're 30-something.
And then it went away. After about 4 days, gone. No problems anymore. Gone. Now, I bet I will after I'm here, too. So after I've been here, it'll probably happen again, but less severe.
I don't want to get too political, but we're about 2.5, 3 weeks from the election, and I keep, oh my God, you can't go anywhere. Democracy, democracy, democracy. Democracy's on the line. I think this morning we gave more money to Ukraine. Obviously, we're giving Israel all sorts of money. We got 1,000 military bases around the world. I think both parties are basically corrupt, and I mean, vote for whoever you want, but that's my view. But this is really unbelievable because it seems that the politicians that are running for president, Congress, Senate, a lot of them seem to think their job is to represent the rest of the world. Yet, I mean, what do you call this other than a sacrifice zone? Anybody?
It's definitely a sacrifice zone. And speaking about the political stuff, I'm giving all the money to other countries. I mean, what, they're giving $750 to the flood victims down in North Carolina and Georgia and Tennessee and everything. We're stuck in our homes. We can't get out, and they're spending billions of dollars overseas. What about us? Why don't we count? Why don't we matter?
And I think that's important what you said. I mean, obviously we want the folks in North Carolina to get help, but the reason they're able to get help so quickly is because of the law. The law says that hurricanes and tornadoes and, you know, all that, that's a natural disaster. So the federal government for natural disasters can issue a disaster declaration, and immediately you get FEMA, the Army Corps of Engineers could go in, a lot more money. Flint was not a issue. Obama did not issue a disaster declaration. Biden has had on his desk for, I don't know, a year now, a disaster declaration for East Palestine, hasn't signed it. Now, they will say, well, we can't sign it because the Stafford Act, which is a law, is very specific in what can be made a disaster and what can't be. So you're telling me natural disasters, we can help the people, but corporate-made disasters, we can't help the people? I mean, it makes no sense.
Superfund can be declared, and they can use that to move us out. That's what happened in Times Beach, Missouri. I think Stanford Act came in for Love Canal. You know, there's other ways, and they could always amend either one of them or create a new one. The bottom line is our families are suffering, and it's, you know, if people want to stay and they know the risk, that's up to them, but nobody should be having to stay here.
And I think what's very alarming here is, there's a lot of things, but I mean, this is going to be generational because we're talking about children who are.
Yeah, 10 years worth of medical coverage. I think it covers like once a year exam. Dioxin, according to one expert I've listened to, goes down 13 generations. You know, this needs to cover the children of the children who are here. This needs to cover all the babies that are going to be born of the people who are here, whether they're not childbearing ages yet or if they're already of childbearing ages. It needs to cover.
I was about to say, who knows the reproductive issues women are going to have.
Yeah, like they're not being transparent on the risk here. The risk, though, in their risk assessment is injury or death. Injury or death in their risk assessment. So I think whoever makes those numbers should be able to be charged for premeditated murder down the line, because that's exactly what it is.
And I'd like to ask again. I don't want to get political, but he could be president. J.D. Vance represents Ohio. He came here, didn't he go in the creek at one point? You know, so does Sherrod Brown. So they're both a Republican senator, a Democrat senator. Brown's up for re-election. Obviously, Vance is running for vice president. Vance was told by the head of the National Transportation Safety Board that Norfolk Southern didn't have to do this, that they blew off the experts telling them not to blow up the trains. In Vance's words, he said, well, it sure sounds like this town might have been poisoned to open up freight. I reached out to his office. Okay, you've seen the light. Are you going to call for a criminal investigation? No response. Same thing with Brown. Same thing with Senator Casey in Pennsylvania, Fetterman, Shapiro, Governor DeWine, who's taken a lot of money from Norfolk Southern. So, I mean, for the residents here, obviously health is most important, but I would think you care about criminal justice too. It just seems like Norfolk Southern opened up a couple offices. They gave you a park. And other than that, you're SOL.
That's what it seems like. I think with the representatives, everybody would do better if there were people writing in mass. I know it's a pain in the butt. I know a lot of people don't understand how that works, but that is how for every letter they get, they assume that I think 100 people feel the same way. When you don't have people writing because they don't believe the system works, it's not going to. Their job is to represent us, and if we're not telling them what we need from them, they can't do it. And that applies to both parties. You know, yeah. I've seen it work in other situations, but we don't have the numbers because people they don't feel qualified. They don't believe there's any point in it. You know, there's a million reasons why, but that's part of the problem with all of the representatives is they're not getting enough people that are telling them, hey, this is a problem. And it might be that there aren't enough people yet that see the problem, and that's what terrifies me. You know, the group of us that you're going to meet with from time to time when you come through here, whether it's different faces, we've been learning about this from the beginning. We've been talking to experts. We've been talking to the people who went through this in the past. We've been finding out what happened to their communities. So we have an idea what we're looking at. But the people who are just blindly trusting the EPA and believing that we are really off our rocker conspiracy theorists, they're the ones that are going to be dumbfounded if their families get sick down the road. And I don't want to see that happen.
And I know some of the people that I have been writing to are people that I have voted for, and I believe that I should hold them even more accountable because I voted for them, and I mean, I'm kind of losing faith in the system, so I'm sorry.
No,
but
I know.
I do agree with you, though. That's how democracy works. And if people don't voice their opinions, their representatives won't focus their need there, yes.
And I also think... if you want to move in here. I also think class plays a big part in this because this is a poor area. And I think that the government, Norfolk Southern, the lawyers just assume, all right, we'll offer them crumbs. But for a lot of these residents, those crumbs are more money than they're normally going to see. So a lot of the residents wanted, I'm not criticizing residents who wanted the settlement, I understand, but a lot of the residents saw, I might be able to get, $40, $50, $60, $70,000. So they wanted that money quickly. They might not have health symptoms now, but that doesn't mean they're not going to get cancer 5 years from now. And that 40, 50, 60 is not covering your cancer treatments. That's for sure.
And that signs off all your rights. That signs off all your rights.
To sue.
Yeah. I mean, there's a separate for the public health, but there's a lot of rights and a lot of people you write off of responsibility when you take the property damage. it's not enough to relocate. Not in this housing market. And they don't guarantee you. They say, oh, you should get, this is what I've been told, because I did opt out. What I've been told by people who went there is, yeah, they said I should get 70,000, but you won't know until you get the check.
Keep in mind, though,
That's
too,
not right.
that they, like, whenever we relocated for a little bit, we were staying in a hotel. So out of that $70,000, our hotel bill was $35,000.
And that's great you brought that up. So you're going to have to give that back as part of the 70,000 you get. So it's not really them helping you. That's it's a loan you have to pay back.
Exactly. $35,000 is what our hotel bill was for our hotel and food, and so they'll take that out of it. So we'll end up with 35,000 possibly. And what are you going to do with that? You can't buy a house with that. You can't move out with that. You can't treat cancer down the road with $35,000. It's a slap in the face.
You guys kind of feel like you're just prisoners in your own community, for lack of a better term?
Shouting into the void. That's how I feel.
A lot of what I've gone through, I feel violated. Over and over and over again.
I wouldn't say prisoner. I would say more like a mental patient at an institution. But I'll keep screaming. And let whoever.
I got news for you. I'd be going mental. I'd be going mental if I was stuck to live somewhere where, I know what's causing my health symptoms. If my kid's sick, I'm sick. The government's just literally gaslighting you. I mean, this is gas. And they're just telling you, well, we can't really give a straight arrow, as they say. I don't know how anyone would stay sane.
Have you ever looked at the effects of gaslighting as a form of constant abuse? Because they're not good. But the chemicals also will affect people's mental health and cognitive abilities and memory. So we have two things at play. There's the psychological, the gaslighting, the infighting within the community, the threats, the just nastiness, the lying, or what we feel is lying by the EPA, what we have seen documentation of different, but still being told no, that's not correct. But then there's also the chemicals and what they do to your brain. So it's kind of both sides.
Yeah, I mean, I've been talking to folks, depression, anxiety, PTSD.
Irritability, stress, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. All of it.
You were saying stress?
Well, absolutely. I mean, since this happened, like I lost my job because of my heart condition. I had a good job. We're living off of just my wife's income. There's a lot of stress right there on that. I mean, just paying bills is tough right now with the situation we're in right now. Right. I mean, it's so many things that we weren't ready for, we didn't plan for, we didn't prepare for, and now we're forced to deal with them.
And Norfolk Southern's not paying for Christmas. Norfolk Southern's not paying for the Thanksgiving turkey. Norfolk Southern's not giving you a vacation. They're not paying for whatever treatments your kids are going to need. So money equals stress. Exactly. Ashley, can you tell folks a little bit more about the health study that apparently you are doing rather than the CDC or the EPA? Because people from town in Pennsylvania are going to be watching this.
So I've been working on it since last year around March, and I've had everyone helping me. Krista has been a huge part in helping me and getting things together. I've made sure at least I'm hearing symptoms a handful of times before I put them on a paper. Then I keep hearing them. So the whole list turned into 95 symptoms by the time I testified for Mastriano in Pennsylvania. And George Thompson reached out to me and said, I want those symptoms. I want to see and compare them. And after he had them and had meetings with us a couple times, he's like, all of these symptoms match all of the chemicals that we're seeing that were released in your town. So they all perfectly fit what's going on.
And let me just cut in there, because this is to Mr. Durno. George Thompson doesn't work for the government. He's a 80-something-year-old toxicologist. And what he's telling you is 2 + 2 = 4. You're not crazy, and he's giving you the expertise that these chemicals will link to this symptom. And the EPA has the experts that could tell you the same thing. So does the CDC. It's just one is motivated to normalize mass poisoning. One, maybe it's not the lower level people, but the top don't want to set a precedent, I believe, for actually helping communities like this because there's so many of them. Flint, Detroit, now Conyers, Georgia with that chemical fire. Kalamazoo, it goes on and on and on. So the health surveys, are you going door to door with that, or how do people fill those out?
I'm going to be posting them either today, by the end of the day, or tomorrow on EP Strong on their or on their Facebook group. So that'll go up there, and anyone can fill it out as long as they put their name. They can be anonymous. It will not be shared with anyone. So it'll either go to medical professionals to look at what's going on and the distance, not your personal information. At no point will that be shared, and I think people are worried about that. But it seems like people are also getting to a point where they don't care. It's just too much stress on them. It's too many hospital visits, just a lot going on. So people are ready to get stuff done. And this is the best way that we could probably do this right now, and hand it over to the EPA and the Ohio Department of Health. And they can either choose to accept it or reject it.
Anything else you guys want the audience to know?
I just saw something happen, and it's just unbelievable.
Oh,
this
yeah, you did.
this
You
guy
did too?
just drove up, and we're like monkeys in a zoo. Yeah. They just took a picture of us all standing up here talking. Really? Yeah.
It wouldn't be the first time.
Hope they got my good side. So who knows? That could be Norfolk Southern. It could be the EPA. It could be some rogue. Who knows?
They look like somebody from town, but I forgot your question.
Anything before we end you want the audience to know?
Oh, this isn't now. We've seen, you just mentioned it a minute ago. We're not the only town that this is going on with now. People down in Conyers, Georgia are having a lot of the same symptoms. We can't just say that it's the same, because
I just interviewed a mother who's lost a 17-year-old daughter, a 32-year-old son, because she lives a block away from a massive packaging company that I don't even think it's dramatic to say is gassing a poor black community that the Democratic governor, for some reason, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, helped them expand. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think from who I've talked to down there, too, is they're a community that's a lot like ours as well. But they're having some of the same issues, and nobody's helping them either. And they've even had their soil guy die, coming out of a meeting. And now,
actually, their soil guy died after calling for a federal criminal investigation. To be clear, I don't know the cause of death, but it is suspect.
Well, I don't know if you'd say investigating, but they were going to do an autopsy on it. And then the family decided to have a third-party autopsy done instead. So obviously there's questions there. So it's not just here, down Louisiana, out in other places you've gone to, in Flint, Michigan. It happens over and over again. And what I've heard from Conyers is it's the same thing. The same attorneys, we're going to evacuate you, but then you can go to a assistance center. And then they're like, wait, if we go to the assistance center, then we can't do a lawsuit later. That was the same thing that they tried to do here. They wanted to make them sign off on their future litigation. So it's the same thing over and over again. It's the same playbook.
Well, all I could say is we'll keep coming back and keep fighting the good fight. Hopefully, at a certain point, it'll be too much of a catastrophe for them to cover up. That's my hope. But thank you guys for talking to us.